On the edge of the Kruger Reserve, where untamed wilderness meets peace and quiet, something incredible happened. A female lion with her 2 babies showed up on the wooden deck of Emma's white cabin, begging for help in a desperate situation. What would you do if Africa's most feared wild animal put her faith in you? This is a tale of remarkable trust that crosses natural limits, about a choice that could transform a whole life. Let's discover this amazing story together. Early morning light came through the thick green treetops and into Emma Clark's white wooden cabin. At 32 years old, she had found contentment in her secluded life in the border area of Kruger National Park, South Africa. Every morning, Emma kept the same schedule, drinking coffee on the big deck, watching the wilderness come alive, camera always within reach. On a morning in early October, when springtime rains had just passed through, making everything even more green, Emma spotted the lioness for the first time. She showed up at the edge of the open space around the house, her golden fur with dark markings mixing perfectly with the dried grass and plants. Emma stopped mid-drink of her coffee, being careful not to make any quick moves that could scare the creature. Carefully, she grabbed her camera and took several pictures as the lioness looked around the space with sharp, watchful eyes before vanishing into the bushes. The meeting lasted barely a minute, but left Emma feeling incredible happiness. Lions are very careful animals, almost never coming close to where people live even though they're fairly widespread in Africa's wild places. For a lioness to come near the cabin was unusual. During the next week, the lioness showed up 3 more times, always at sunrise, always keeping a safe gap from the house. Emma started to notice repeated behaviors. How she always came out from the same group of trees. How she stopped to smell the wind. How her ears stood up at even the smallest noise from the cabin. Looking through her zoom lens, Emma could tell the lioness was pretty skinny. Emma understood this was a young lioness having trouble catching prey, maybe because of rivalry from bigger lion groups in the region. Making a choice that broke traditional wildlife care rules. But listen to what her heart told her. Emma started putting out small portions of food, mostly meat from an antelope that had naturally died at the clearing's edge. She left it far enough from the cabin so the lioness wouldn't get frightened, but near enough to watch from the deck. The first food she left vanished during the night, likely taken by caracals or hyenas. But on the 5th morning, she saw the lioness carefully walk up to the small bowl, smell the meat cautiously, then rapidly eat it before going back to the protection of the woods. Leaving food became part of Emma's daily routine. She was thoughtful not to give too much, just enough to add to the lioness's natural food sources, not take their place. She studied lions thoroughly and talked through email with a wildlife expert from the state university about whether this was right and practical. Emma carefully followed all the guidance she got. Some days she left food, other days she didn't. She never attempted to get near the lioness or make her come closer to the cabin. Their connection, if you could name it that, was built on shared respect and keeping distance. As October changed to November and spring rainfall renewed the grasslands, the lioness's appearances became more regular. Emma started to see small shifts in the wild lioness's actions. While still being careful, she would stay longer in the clearing, occasionally resting in the gentle sunlight after eating the food. One time she even remained when Emma walked onto the deck, simply staring at her with those powerful amber eyes before gradually going back into the woods. In her weekly phone call with her sister, Emma talked about the lioness. Her sister was both impressed and concerned about Emma's safety, but she explained this wasn't a household pet, but a wild animal she was watching from far away. After many weeks of watching, Emma learned the lioness had 2 babies. She had never spotted them herself, just tinier paw marks in the wet ground next to their mother's trail. This made Emma admire the lioness even more. Even though taking food from a person, the wild lioness kept her natural caution, particularly concerning her young ones, exactly as she should. December came with stronger rains and the sticky heat of African summertime. Emma felt concerned about how the lioness and babies were managing with the damp weather. She started putting food in a small wooden shelter she had constructed at the clearing's edge. A basic three-walled building giving some cover from the weather. January came with an especially bad summer storm with more than 18 inches of rain and sudden flooding that made going outside risky. For 3 days, Emma remained inside, continually checking news about destruction in the region. She felt worried about the lioness and babies, wishing they had discovered safe cover. When the storm at last ended and skies became clear, Emma walked through thick mud to put food in the shelter. To her happiness, new tracks showed up the following morning, proving the lioness had made it through the storm. But something seemed off. The tracks looked irregular, not the typical straight coming and going pattern, and there was just one set of tracks. No trace of the tinier prints that normally came with the mother. Concerns about the baby's survival troubled Emma all day long as she worked on photos and wrote to publishers. The explanation arrived the following morning in an unexpected manner. Emma was sitting at her desk when an unusual noise from the deck got her attention. It wasn't the typical forest noises, not birds at the feeder or wind moving through the pines. It was a deliberate noise, sort of like scratching at a door. Walking carefully to the window, Emma peered out and felt shocked. The lioness was standing right on the white wooden deck, something that had never occurred before. But what really surprised her was what rested at the lioness's feet. 2 tiny soaked figures that Emma right away knew were lion babies, one of them covered in mud and looking lifeless. The lioness stared directly at her through the window, amber eyes appearing to show a frantic request. Then, with a quiet grunt, the wild lioness moved back several steps, still looking hard at the cabin. Emma's thoughts were racing. This contradicted everything she understood about wild creature behavior. A lioness should keep her babies safe in a protected den, not carry them to a human home. Something really serious was wrong. Moving carefully so she wouldn't scare the lioness, Emma cracked open the door just enough to look at the babies more closely. One was moving around, licking the face of the other. The other remained still except for the gentle up and down of its tiny chest. One of its back legs was bent at a wrong angle, and dried blood covered the fur around an injury. The lioness stayed at the deck's edge, body stiff, ears pressed down, obviously uneasy with being so close to the house, but not willing to leave her hurt baby. Understanding the lioness was asking for help, Emma felt tears starting to form. This wild animal, responding to some mysterious feeling, had carried her injured baby to the only possible source of help for many miles around, the woman who had given her food during the past months. Emma's first phone call was to Dr. James Parker, a veterinarian she knew. After listening to the situation, he agreed this was unheard of behavior, but time was urgent. If the lioness had really carried her baby to Emma's door, the baby's health could be very bad. With James's instructions over the phone, Emma got ready for an unbelievable job. Getting close to a wild lioness and her baby. Carrying thick leather gloves, a soft towel, and a pet box, she prepared herself for what lay ahead. She put a little bit of food at the far side of the deck, wishing to distract the lioness for a moment. The lioness stared with strong concentration as Emma slowly came out from the cabin, her body movements revealing both fear and an odd resolve. As Emma slowly got near the injured baby, the lioness made a low growl in her throat, but didn't rush or strike. Rather, she walked nervously at the deck's edge, her look going back and forth between the baby and the coming human. With shaking hands, Emma carefully covered the towel around the small, weak body of the baby. It didn't fight back, eyes shut tight, and breathing difficult. The lioness made a strangled, roaring noise that crushed Emma's heart, but still didn't step in. Putting the covered baby gently in the box, Emma moved backward toward the cabin door. The lioness came forward a few steps, still making upset noises, then halted, looking divided between going after her baby and returning to the safety of the woods. The 3-hour trip to the Kruger Wildlife Recovery Center was stressful and dangerous. Main roads had been cleaned, but water pools and muddy streets made driving unsafe, and the roads going from Emma's cabin to the highway were almost impossible to travel. All through the trip, she talked gently to the box in the passenger seat, where the baby stayed still except for shallow breathing. Emma asked the baby to keep struggling, not wanting to fail the silent agreement to the mother who had given her baby into her hands. Dr. Wilson had phoned ahead and workers were ready when Emma got to the wildlife center. The baby, verified to be male and guessed at around 3 months old, was right away brought for urgent checkup and care. After 2 hours in the treatment space, the veterinarian came out with information. The baby had a complicated break of the tibia and fibula. There were also indicators of being too cold and not having enough food. But he was young and in spite of everything pretty tough. The doctor thought he would live, but getting better would be long and there was serious doubt about whether he could be let back into the wilderness after such bad injury and lengthy human interaction during healing. Emma thought about the lioness, maybe still walking around near her cabin, hoping for the baby's return. She had made a promise to take him back, but now realized that promise might not be achievable. In the coming weeks, Emma split her time between the cabin and the wildlife center, taking the 3-hour trip every couple of days to see how the baby was doing. She had started naming him Leo in her thoughts. The baby was reacting well to care. The broken leg mending correctly in its little cast, weight going up regularly on the special food given by the center workers. During her visits, Emma saw the detailed steps rehabilitation workers used to reduce human attachment, using special feeding tools to stop Leo from connecting humans with food, keeping direct interaction limited, and letting him experience natural conditions and sounds from his home environment. But even with these careful steps, it became more and more obvious that Leo's young age when he got hurt, along with the long human help needed for his healing, was changing his growth pattern. While he kept many wild behaviors, he wasn't displaying the fear reaction to humans required for successful return into the wilderness. Leo was reaching an important growth stage, Dr. Harrison told Emma during her visit in late February as they observed Leo carefully investigating an enclosed space, his previously broken leg now holding his weight with just a small limp. The coming weeks would decide whether fixing him up for release stayed a realistic choice. Emma agreed, observing the young lion with complicated feelings. Part of her really hoped Leo would completely get back his wild character to be able to give him back to his mother as she'd promised. Another part, which she hesitantly admitted even to herself, had grown fond of the baby with the alert ears and spotted fur. In the days and weeks after that, Emma kept checking on Leo at the center while keeping her connection with the lioness, who still frequently came to her cabin. The lioness would rest on the deck for hours like she was waiting, occasionally making small, sad calls in the darkness. In mid-March, as the early hints of autumn started to show in the air, the wildlife center workers did their last evaluation of Leo's recovery chances. After talking with specialists from 3 other places, the answer was obvious. Leo had formed a degree of comfort with humans that made him wrong for release. While Emma had mentally gotten ready for this result, listening to it officially stated brought a rush of disappointment through her. So what comes next? There were multiple wildlife sanctuaries with appropriate spaces for lions. But there was also Emma's request for the home recovery program. Emma had turned in documents weeks before, at the same time starting needed classes and talking with builders about making a proper enclosure on her land. Back then, it felt like an unlikely chance, a backup option she wished wouldn't be needed. After 6 weeks of hard work, Emma finished training requirements, learning details about lion habits, feeding, activity needs, and health watching. Building of Leo's enclosure, a roomy space adding natural things like trees, rocks, and a small man-made stream, moved forward quickly despite occasional bad weather. During this period, the lioness kept coming to Emma's cabin, though not as often as autumn moved forward and wild animals to hunt became easier to find. She didn't come up to the deck anymore, but frequently showed up at the clearing's border, staring at the cabin with those mysterious amber eyes before disappearing back into the growing thick forest. During these appearances, Emma would talk quietly to the lioness from the deck, updating her about Leo's improvement, about the fixed leg and increasing power. These words meant nothing to the wild lioness, naturally, but they assisted Emma in working through her mixed feelings about the circumstances. The thankfulness she experienced toward this wonderful creature who had believed in her, the disappointment that she couldn't keep her promise precisely as planned, and the wish that her different answer might still respect that belief in some manner. At the close of April, with the jacaranda trees starting to flower and Leo's enclosure at last finished, Emma took her last trip to the wildlife center, not as someone visiting, but to take Leo to his new home. The young lion, now almost 6 months old and much bigger than when she first put him in the pet box on that wet January morning, rode in a special transport box in the rear of Emma's SUV. Wildlife Center workers had gotten both Emma and Leo ready for the move as completely as they could, but the time of letting him into the new enclosure was still nerve-wracking. Emma moved back as Dr. Harrison, who had come with them to watch over things, pulled open the box door and moved away. For multiple long minutes, Leo stayed in the box, just his nose sticking out as he smelled the new surroundings. Then, with typical cat-like carefulness, he came out. His movement was smooth, the old injury visible only in the slightly altered color of fur grown over the healed injury. Still, Emma didn't breathe as Leo looked over his new area, slowly moving from the sheltered spot near the box to check out the open area, climbing features and hiding places built into the layout. He was especially curious about the small stream feature, coming up carefully to put one paw in the moving water before hopping back, then coming up again with more boldness. "He's taking to the space," Dr. Harrison spoke softly next to Emma. "This is a really positive indication." In the days after that, Emma observed Leo adjust to his new surroundings, obeying the detailed rules created to reduce more human familiarity while making sure his needs were handled. She gave food through special feeding systems that stopped him from linking her straight with meals, kept up activity items, and checked his health from far away, all while going on with her usual photography work and constantly looking for any appearances from the lioness. About a week after Leo's coming, the lioness at last showed up again. Emma noticed her at sunset, coming from the tree line at the forest border, as she had done many times before. But this evening, rather than halting at the clearing's edge, the lioness walked with purpose toward the specially made enclosure at the property's side. Emma observed from the white wooden deck, camera in her hand, but not thinking about it as the moment happened. The lioness came up to the enclosure slowly, walking around the outside once before halting at the part nearest to the forest. Through the special fence, she and Leo looked at each other for the first time since being apart almost 4 months earlier. What happened between them, Emma had no idea. Both lions remained perfectly still, amber eyes meeting in quiet understanding. After a few minutes, the lioness sat down, still looking at the enclosure. On the inside, Leo copied the position. Tears filled Emma's eyes as she saw this coming together. Not the same as what she had promised on that rainy January morning, but maybe just as important. The mother had taken her hurt baby to the only assistance she could find, and against all chances, that baby had lived and grown strong. As night came, the lioness at last stood up and went back toward the forest border. But she didn't leave completely. Rather, she found a spot in a section of jacaranda with a direct view of the enclosure, her shape easy to see in the coming up moonlight. This behavior kept going during the next days and weeks. The lioness would come by often, occasionally coming up to the enclosure to have that quiet exchange with Leo, other times just observing from a distance. She never came up to the cabin straight on again, staying at the careful distance right for her wild character, but appearing to recognize, maybe even support the setup Emma had made. By the middle of winter, as Leo grew in size and adult fur color, the mother's appearances became not as regular, matching with the natural splitting up that would have happened if both stayed wild. But she didn't vanish totally from their world. Even a year after, the watching cameras Emma had put up sometimes recorded pictures of the lioness walking the property's border, occasionally stopping near the enclosure before going on her lone path. For Emma, this ongoing link was ultimate proof that she had, in her particular way, honored her promise. She hadn't given Leo straight back to his mother or to the wilderness, but she had made a place where he could exist securely while keeping some tie to his beginnings. She had respected the belief given to her on that rainy summer morning when a frantic mother had gone against her natural reactions to look for assistance from a person. As she put together her third book of wildlife pictures, featuring amazing images of both Leo and his mother, Emma frequently thought about the remarkable series of happenings that had connected them all. Her basic action of putting out food for a starving lioness had started a connection that questioned usual barriers between wild and tame, between humans stepping in and natural ways. It wasn't a flawless answer. Nothing dealing with the complicated meeting point of human and wildlife living could be. But in its flaws, in the give and take and changes made by everyone involved, there was a deep beauty that Emma captured not only in her pictures, but in her everyday existence among the sloping hills, where a wild mother still wandered free, and her son existed securely under the watch of the woman she had, against impossible odds, picked to believe in. In the final analysis, the biggest prize wasn't Leo, though Emma valued his place in her world. The true prize was the belief of a wild animal. A belief that had changed Emma's grasp of her role in the natural environment and strengthened her dedication to guarding the fragile equilibrium between human living and wildlife protection in these old forests they all named home. Occasionally when sunrise came over the land, Emma could still see a golden shape traveling through the bright jacaranda flowers, amber eyes directed at the white wooden house and the enclosure next to it. A quiet signal of the unique connection created between three separate beings in a time of emergency. A connection that continued even as the lines between wild and tame stayed in place. And occasionally when the lioness carried along a new baby, one Emma had never laid eyes on before, to get a look at its separated brother through the fence, Emma understood she had genuinely become part of the lion's tale. Not as someone who owns or directs, but as a reliable guardian between two realms, a keeper of the delicate line where wildness joins human care. Did you enjoy this story? What would you have done if a wild lioness showed up at your door with her injured cub, looking at you for help? Would you have been brave enough to help, or would fear have stopped you from getting involved? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video.